In the heart of the once thriving city of Ravenswood, an eerie calm settled over the streets. The night sky hung heavy with an oppressive darkness, and an unnatural stillness gripped the air. The residents of Ravenswood had unknowingly become pawns in a sinister game, a game orchestrated by forces beyond their comprehension. It all began when the moon rose high in the sky, casting an ominous glow over the city. Without warning, the dead from the cemeteries began to stir. Tombstones trembled as the ground beneath them quivered with an unseen energy. The restless spirits, long confined to their graves, rose with a malevolent purpose. As the clock struck midnight, a chilling wind swept through the deserted streets of Ravenswood. The deceased, clad in tattered burial garments, emerged from their resting places. Hollow eyes stared ahead, devoid of the warmth of life, as the macabre procession moved through the shadows. The first victim, a solitary figure walking home from a late-night shift, suddenly felt an otherworldly chill. Unseen hands reached out from the darkness, grasping at the very essence of his soul. He stumbled and fell to the ground, gasping for breath as an invisible force drained the life from his veins. Word spread like wildfire through the city as more and more residents succumbed to the malevolent presence. Panic and fear gripped the living as they realized that death had chosen Ravenswood as its unholy playground. Desperate cries for help echoed through the empty streets, but there was no refuge from the encroaching doom. The once bustling city became a ghost town, with the dead outnumbering the living. Those who had not yet fallen victim to the spectral onslaught barricaded themselves indoors, praying that the nightmare would pass. But there was no escaping the inexorable fate that had befallen Ravenswood. The city's emergency services were paralyzed, unable to comprehend or combat the supernatural menace. Hospital beds filled with the lifeless bodies of those who had succumbed to the ethereal onslaught. The few survivors, huddled in their homes, could hear the haunting whispers of the deceased outside, beckoning them to join the growing legion of the lifeless. As dawn broke, the city that once teemed with life now lay in the cold grip of death. The streets were littered with the remains of those who had fallen prey to the spectral horde. Ravenswood had become a necropolis, a forsaken realm where the boundary between the living and the dead had blurred into a nightmarish tableau. The sun rose hesitantly, casting feeble rays upon the desolation below. The city of Ravenswood had become a cursed land, a testament to the malevolent power that had seized control. As the last echoes of the unholy night faded away, the dead returned to their graves, leaving the city in a deathly silence. Ravenswood, once a vibrant metropolis, now stood as a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the unspeakable horrors that could be unleashed when the boundaries between the living and the dead were shattered. The once proud city had been claimed by the spectral forces that had risen from the depths of the earth, and its legacy would forever be etched in the annals of supernatural dread. In the aftermath of the supernatural siege, a lone survivor emerged from the shadows, his face etched with the trauma of witnessing the city's descent into darkness. Johnathan Hartfield, a local historian, had inadvertently become a witness to the horrifying events that had unfolded in Ravenswood. His once inquisitive mind now grappled with the weight of the unspeakable and the unexplainable. Haunted by the ghostly whispers that seemed to linger in his ears, Johnathan embarked on a harrowing quest to uncover the origins of the malevolent force that had besieged Ravenswood. Armed with ancient texts and forgotten lore, he delved into the city's archives, searching for any clues that might shed light on the supernatural calamity that had befallen his home. As he pieced together fragments of forgotten myths and legends, Johnathan discovered a chilling tale of a cursed burial ground hidden beneath Ravenswood. According to the ancient lore, the cemetery had been desecrated centuries ago, leading to a pact between the restless spirits and a malevolent force seeking vengeance. Driven by a newfound determination to break the curse, Johnathan ventured into the bowels of the city, guided by the eerie whispers that seemed to beckon him towards the source of the darkness. The journey through the silent streets, littered with the remnants of the dead, felt like a descent into the abyss. The cursed burial ground revealed itself in a forgotten corner of Ravenswood, hidden beneath layers of urban decay. The air grew thick with the stench of death as Johnathan confronted the spectral horde that lingered around the unhallowed graves. With a heart heavy with grief and a resolve strengthened by desperation, he recited incantations and rituals meant to appease the vengeful spirits. As the incantations echoed through the necropolis, a spectral figure emerged from the midst of the dead. The ghostly apparition, a long-forgotten guardian of the cursed burial ground, spoke in mournful tones. It recounted the tale of betrayal and desecration that had bound the spirits to their tormented existence. In a climactic confrontation between the living and the dead, Johnathan pleaded with the vengeful spirits to spare Ravenswood from eternal damnation. Guided by a glimmer of humanity that lingered within the spectral entities, he offered a solemn vow to rectify the sins of the past and restore the sanctity of the cursed cemetery. The apparitions wavered, their ethereal forms flickering in the half-light of dawn. The malevolent force that had held Ravenswood in its grip began to recede, like a retreating tide. The survivors, still hiding in the shadows, witnessed the gradual lifting of the supernatural veil that had shrouded their city. With a final, mournful whisper, the vengeful spirits returned to their rest. Ravenswood, though scarred and forever changed, was released from the clutches of the supernatural darkness that had consumed it. As the sun bathed the city in its golden rays, the survivors emerged cautiously from their hiding places, the weight of the nightmarish ordeal etched into their collective memory. Johnathan, weary and haunted by the events he had witnessed, stood amidst the ruins of the cursed burial ground. The city around him bore the scars of its supernatural ordeal, but there was a glimmer of hope in the air. The survivors, though forever changed, would rebuild their shattered lives, carrying the knowledge of the thin veil between the living and the dead that lingered in the recesses of their minds. In the days that followed, Ravenswood struggled to regain a semblance of normalcy. The survivors, still haunted by the nightmares of the supernatural siege, gathered in solemn unity. They formed a community bound by shared trauma and an unspoken understanding of the fragility of their existence. Johnathan, hailed as both a savior and a symbol of resilience, became a reluctant leader. Driven by a sense of responsibility to the city that had suffered so much, he dedicated himself to unraveling the mysteries of the supernatural forces that had threatened Ravenswood. The survivors, too, contributed to the restoration of their once vibrant city. They tended to the wounded, cleared the debris-strewn streets, and held makeshift memorials for the fallen. The cemetery, once a source of terror, became a focal point for reflection and remembrance. As the city slowly healed, Johnathan delved deeper into his research. He sought ancient texts and consulted with scholars in obscure corners of the world, determined to understand the origins of the curse that had befallen Ravenswood. His investigations led him to a forgotten prophecy, foretelling the awakening of a malevolent force that sought retribution for sins long buried. In a revelation that sent shivers down his spine, Johnathan discovered that the curse had not been fully lifted. The supernatural forces that had besieged Ravenswood remained dormant, their hunger for vengeance momentarily sated but far from extinguished. The city stood at the precipice of a delicate balance, with the threat of the supernatural still lingering in the shadows. With newfound urgency, Johnathan convened the survivors, sharing the unsettling truth with them. Together, they embarked on a quest to break the curse once and for all. Armed with knowledge, ancient artifacts, and a shared determination, the group ventured into the heart of the cursed burial ground. The journey was fraught with peril, as the spectral remnants of the vengeful spirits sought to deter them. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy as the survivors faced trials that tested their resolve. Johnathan, guided by an unyielding sense of purpose, led the way with a flickering lantern that cast long shadows on the ancient tombstones. As they reached the epicenter of the cursed burial ground, a chilling wind swept through the air. The ghostly apparition, the guardian who had once recounted the tale of betrayal, materialized before them. Its eyes, once filled with anger, now reflected a flicker of recognition. Johnathan, armed with the knowledge he had gathered, spoke the words of a long-forgotten incantation. The survivors, forming a protective circle, joined their voices in a chorus that resonated through the spectral realm. The guardian, caught between the past and the present, hesitated before finally bowing to the collective will of the living. In a burst of ethereal light, the curse that had gripped Ravenswood for centuries began to unravel. The supernatural forces that had tormented the city dispersed, their malevolence fading into the echoes of history. The survivors, weary yet triumphant, emerged from the burial ground as the first rays of sunlight illuminated the once cursed city. Ravenswood, scarred but resilient, breathed a collective sigh of relief. The survivors, their faces etched with the indelible marks of the supernatural ordeal, stood together in the dawn of a new era. The city would rebuild, not just in physical structures, but in the spirit of those who had faced the horrors beyond the veil of life and death. As time passed, the events of that fateful night became a haunting legend, whispered from one generation to the next. Ravenswood, though forever marked by its brush with the supernatural, emerged stronger than ever. The thin veil between the living and the dead, once shattered, now served as a reminder of the city's resilience, a testament to the enduring power of hope in the face of unspeakable darkness.
Like, subscribe and click on notifications that will allow you to stay up to date with the news and not miss videos from the channel, where there will be many more horror stories.